Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Guerrilla Poker, and in this video I'm going to keep going through some hands from two of the current top of the ladder guys in 6max no limit, Llinuslove and Stefan. Hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, so we are heads up 5100, roughly 200 big blinds deep. Llinus raises and Stefan calls. The raise to roughly 2.5x. There are nuances here where generally as you're shorter, the raise size gets a bit smaller, and as you're deeper, it gets a bit bigger. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but there is a fairly high chance that Llinus is at least somewhat sensitive to this. Although, judging by the last hand where they were 100 deep and he went the big size, probably not too much. This is like a tiny thing where, you know, you have simplification versus accuracy. And the fact that you do things a bit more simple and less accurate kind of leaves you room and energy to focus on what matters. And Llinus apparently doesn't think changing your raise size by a tick or two is very important. So, ace-8 3-2 tone. Llinus leads out with a small bet, indicating a very wide betting range. And again, if he's simplifying, just a range bet. We get to the turn 6 of diamonds. Stefan checks and Llinus fires with a small overbet, almost 150%. Here, kind of what you need to be aware of is, first of all, you know, this size is very appropriate, and the range that's good enough to bet this big is top pair good kicker plus. So in heads up, probably somewhere around ace-10 plus or ace-9 plus can go for this size. With the top pair good kicker hands not necessarily firing rivers, and two pairs probably firing rivers. So yeah, Llinus bets and Stefan comes in with a raise, which Llinus calls. And again, if you want to think about the ranges, what would Stefan have for value? Well, ace-6, 8-6, 3-6, and pocket sixes should be like that at the tip of your tongue, right? Everything that improved on the 6. Possibly some slow plays, but he's not going to have too many of those. And then, you know, as bluffs, there are a million very attractive bluffs here. All the combo draws, tons of flush draws and straight draws, so you just need to watch out not to overdo it, because there's so much tempting stuff like, you know, 9-7 of clubs, 9-5 of clubs, same with diamonds, even stuff like 5-deuce of clubs, so tons and tons of tempting stuff to check raise. So yeah, kind of a balancing act with those, but I think, like, Stefan's range is fairly straightforward. You get the jack of spades, Stefan checks, and Llinus fires out with a healthy $5,860 bet, which Stefan calls. Kind of the dynamics of this spot are actually pretty interesting because Stefan check raised a turn, and his range is, like we said, tons of draws and tons of strong hands. Why would he check the jack river? And what's he really check calling with? And depending on how complex Stefan's game is, for a lot of guys the answer would be they are checking busted draws and they are never check calling, right? And this would create a dynamic where Llinus, who sometimes has busted draws himself, like 4 or 5 of clubs, gets to get away with bluffing and always works out for him. And if, kind of to counter this dynamic, Stefan does start having some check calls, which hands they would be. So one example would be if he raised diamonds or clubs with a jack, and he paired the jack, those could check call. Another example is if he raised turn, kind of merge bluff raise with, say, a pair plus flush draw, so maybe a 6-7 of clubs type hand or a king-6 of clubs type hand, and then checks the river and check calls. And then this range is so weak that it would let Llinus value bet every single top pair in his range. So to kind of counteract that, Stefan actually has to check some actual strong hands. And this entire thing that I described, in a computer, this entire balancing act is going on the river. While in practice, most guys are missing some of the pieces. And this You know, this creates, like we said, if Stefan never calls, Llinus can just bluff everything and not worry about value betting. If Stefan starts catching with just bad hands, Llinus wants to value bet very wide. And if Llinus value bets very wide, Stefan wants to start trapping. So you have all these kind of layers and layers going on, and in a computer it will just show you, this is mixed, do this 25%. But in practice, it's a very nice leveling spot, where if you kind of understand how your opponent is playing it, and if he's getting something wrong, nice spot for edge. So we see the showdown. Llinus has ace queen for a value bet. Should ace queen always value bet here? Probably not. It's probably mixed due to the effect I described. And Stefan actually shows up with one of the traps. So he check raised the 2-pair, and despite this hand being clearly good enough to value bet the river, he decided he's going to trap. Kind of a stop sign for Llinus, like you can't value bet this thin. So definitely aware of the dynamic that's going on here. You know, we'll never know unless we ask the players, was this just Stefan trying to play accurately and Llinus trying to play accurately? Or did someone kind of get one over on the other in this hand? So if you're wondering why my shirt is suddenly different, it turns out I recorded an old hand again and did not notice, so I had to re-record the shirts in the laundry, so have to go with it. Either way, for those of you who noticed. So Stefan and Llinus heads up, 250 deep. Keep in mind, this means blood has been spilled, right? You don't get 250 deep without spilling some blood. And kind of thought exercise, can both players be 250 deep? Let's say they were both evenly deep, without one of these guys being a clear winner. Is that actually possible? Be that as it may, we have a heads-up pot. Stefan raises to 265. Llinus calls. We get the 9-4-3 rainbow board. Llinus checks and Stefan bets half pot. Here I always like to talk a bit about the sizings. Half pot is a fairly reasonable size for this board. You don't want to go too small, because then it becomes a bit too easy to float, and with all the cards being low, almost anything is good enough to float. A small bet. Ideally, you'd go bigger, but anything works as long as you execute it well, guys. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't get hung up on catching the perfect size, which this probably isn't, but it's good enough. It's a fairly good one. So Stefan bets half pot, Llinus check raises, Stefan calls, and at this point, if we're thinking what is Linus's range, it's gonna have, you know, pocket 3s, pocket 4s, 9-4, 9-3, 3-4. All of those to some extent. Pocket 9s maybe a bit. I think 9s probably 3 bets pre-flop. It's kind of the thick value range. He could have some hands like ace 9, king 9, maybe 9-8, some 4s and 3s, some straight draws, and some backdoor draws. So say something like jack 8 of clubs. So all of these hands somewhere in the range. And then the range really spread out on the flop. You have to continue really wide. And the main thing you need to keep in mind is which turn cards are gonna hit the bluffing range or miss the bluffing range. So the bluffing range on 3-4-9 is very centered around straight draws. So if the turn is anything that completes straight draws, it tends to be very good for Llinus. While if it's anything else, it tends to be fairly bad for Llinus. So here we get the 7 of diamonds turn. Very good card for Llinus because it completes 6-5. But also pairs 7-5 and 7-6, so a lot of his bluffs improve, and then his range is just very, very strong. Llinus leads with roughly a pot-sized bet. The tiny overbet is not significant in any way. Stefan calls, and here we start to narrow down Linus's range, where before I was saying, maybe he has 9-8. I don't think he has 9-8 anymore. Maybe still ace-9, king-9, low frequency, but really we're kind of narrowing down to the range of like 2 pairs, sets, and straights for value. And then bluffs, you could have ace-5, you could have 5 deuce suited. Anything with a 5 or a 6 is a gut shot on a turn, so plenty of bluffs to choose from. Diamonds, 10-8 if you check raised it, or jack-8, so infinite draws still out there. It's very, very important to visualize these as you're playing, Because otherwise you're just firing in the dark. You're like, what does Llinus have, right? I'm so scared. And it's super important to be able to keep track of the range in your mind as the hand is playing out. And then all the decisions become much more reasonable and much more logical rather than pure guesswork. So here, Jack of Hearts on the river, Llinus pots again. Definitely no 9x in his range at this point. And you need to ask yourselves questions like, say he had Jack 8 or Jack 10. Not super common hands, but those are hands he will have sometimes. Is pot too big or not? And these are important questions because if you're sitting there as Stefan with something like pocket queens, and Llinus is potting a Jack, it's a snap call. If he's potting only 2 pair plus, queens becomes a bit iffy, and you might prefer different types of hands. So, kind of an important thing to think about. I don't have the answer, I'm not a heads-up specialist. So without looking it up, I would guess a Jack is not good enough to pot here. That's kind of my intuition. But this is definitely a spot where Llinus and Stefan will have an edge on me, given how much they play heads up. So yeah, Llinus' range in my eyes fairly polarized at this point. And in terms of bluffs, like I said, Jack completes a bunch of bluffs. Like it doesn't seem intuitive at first glance, but when we say 10, 8, Jack 8, Jack 10, those all completed. So what are we left with to bluff? Well, there's 5 deuce and ace 5. Then there are kind of random backdoor hands like queen 5, queen 6, Jack 5. Jack 5 got there, right? 10 5, king 5. Those hands that could check raise flop, turn a gut shot, still have an overcard and keep firing. And then, given how good the run out is, I think Llinus has to keep firing on the river quite a lot. So he does. Stefan calls. And Llinus shows the queen 6 offsuit. On the surface, no analysis, you might think Llinus is a complete nut. But, check raise makes sense with queen 6, right? Backdoor hand. It's on the loose side, for sure. I'm not sure it would be solver approved, but it's definitely borderline one way or the other. So probably fine. I'll add to that in case anyone is checking technically. My guess is this is a pure fold on the flop and that it's a mistake to check raise. And you need queen 6 with a backdoor flush draw to check raise here, and this hand is just too weak to continue. But I could definitely be wrong. Llinus is much better than me. So take everything I say with a grain of salt when I'm judging Llinus. Yeah, turn play, super good card for you. Fine to fire gut shot. I think this is probably a fairly high frequency play. And then river, another fairly good card. I think good to keep firing. So I think overall, by Llinus, kind of loose on the flop, but I'm probably wrong and he's probably right. And then rest of the hand kind of plays itself, right? So it looks nutty, but it's not really. It's kind of standard. Stefan shows 4-5 of clubs. And here we need to go over every street. So bet half pot, perfect for 4-5. Definitely call the raise. Turn you have a pair plus gut shot. But the 4 and 5 also play interference, right? 4 blocks pocket 4s and 9-4 and 4-3. And this is why I was saying it's really important to understand, do you want to call with queens, or would you rather just have a board pair on the river, right? Because if queens is not beating a jack, then at least the 4 limits Llinus's value combos. So yeah, when Llinus pots the river, I think this is a perfectly reasonable bluff catcher in terms of the 4. To me personally, the 5 doesn't seem great, because I'm thinking 5 do suited, mostly. Is like a hand that gets here a lot and bluffs, and ace 5 gets here a lot and bluffs. So personally, 4-5 to me looks a bit not good. I would go more with a hand like 4-6 or 9-8 or 9-10. Basically, I think the 5's a bit bad, but this is really, technical nitpicking, so to speak. And the way these guys play very often, especially the way Stefan plays, it's more about kind of the game flow. And this is definitely within the reasonable region to call down. So I think, yeah, overall well played hand by both players. Possibly small technical mistakes, possibly not. But yeah, the main thing is that you guys understand what's going on here. So it doesn't seem like super crazy guys playing for $10 and just blasting away. This is actually technically fairly standard, surprising as it may be. That's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the hands and the analysis. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.